Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is worm. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. Now, many times when people see this word, they don't think of a verb, and that's okay. So it might actually help us by thinking about the noun meaning for this particular word. So I've got a picture down in the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, right? You can see a person's hands covered in dirt, and in the dirt are those little creatures called worms. So connecting, right, our kind of mental image now of that picture, I think we can look at this first definition and have it make a little bit of sense. So sometimes when we use this verb worm, we're talking about someone or something that is moving with a lot of difficulty by crawling, just like what we see in that picture there, or wriggling. So kind of think of moving back and forth, trying to get into a particular space. Now, a second way the verb worm gets used can mean to insert one's way into a matter or into a situation. We're going to look at some phrasal verbs that have a similar meaning to this in just a little bit. But really, it sort of means putting oneself in some type of situation. Maybe where one wasn't invited or where one wasn't asked to be. But again, if we kind of go back to that picture of kind of crawling and moving in a way to get into that matter or situation. Now, a third way that you might encounter this verb worm being used is very specific. I think it would be most common to hear vets or doctors that work with animals to use this third definition. So it's when you're treating an animal with a particular type of medicine in order to destroy parasites, or sometimes as they're called, worms. So for now, you should know that worm is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms worming. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding ed. Our base verb, worm, ends in a voice sound. The m sound is voiced. This means the ed ending is just going to make a D sound, and I'm not going to add an extra syllable as I say it. So it should sound like this: wormed, wormed. Okay. Now let's move on and talk about some of those phrasal verbs that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. The first one we're going to discuss today is to worm into. This can have a couple different meanings. We'll talk about two. So the first way you might hear it used can mean to crawl or squeeze into a rather tight or confined space. An example of this might be, the cat worms itself into their bed each night. So we can kind of picture that maybe cat crawling, getting between a couple of sleeping people, so squeezing into that tight space. A second way worm into gets used can mean to get oneself into a place or situation by being rather tricky, using one's wit or one's own cunning. Okay, an example of this: he's wormed himself into weekly meetings with the CEO. Some people really like the idea of being in the presence of, meeting with, talking with very important people. So here, sounds like this is not a person that really needs to be meeting with the CEO because there is a project or some type of matter, but this person has found a way to have this face-to-face time with this very important individual. Now let's move on to another phrasal verb. This phrasal verb, worm out of, can also have a few different meanings. We'll talk about three of them. The first way this phrasal verb gets used can mean to get information or sometimes some secrets from another person by using trickery. An example of this might be, they wormed the password out of Bob without much trouble. So here, the sentence is suggesting two or more people probably tricked this person into sharing a password or something that should be secret. A second way to use worm out of can mean to crawl out of or squeeze out of a tight or confined space. An example of this might be, the teenager wormed his way out of his relative's hugs. Okay. Maybe you've known some people, or maybe as a teenager you were one who was like, I don't want hugs, I don't want my relatives to touch me or really acknowledge that I exist, I'm too cool for that, right? So here we might be talking about someone who's kind of trying to wriggle their way out of being hugged. Now, a third way to use worm out of can mean to remove oneself from some type of situation. Again, it usually involves some trickery or someone's wits, someone trying to be kind of clever in order to get out of something. An example of this, she always worms her way out of doing the dishes. Right? So maybe this is a responsibility, but this person finds a way to not have to do this particular chore. Right? Maybe you have a family member that is like this, that tries to find a way to escape a task that they find unpleasant. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we'll practice the past progressive and the simple future. Let's start with the past progressive. Many times you will hear other teachers, textbooks, and YouTube videos call this the past continuous. And that's just fine. It means exactly the same thing. In the past progressive or past continuous, we're describing an action that was ongoing or an action that was continuing, okay, during a particular period. Now, the reason I like saying past progressive is I try and help my students remember that we're going to need two parts to make our verb. We're going to need a past form of be, and we're going to need the progressive form of the verb. Now, the be verb is special, and it's a verb where we have two forms in the past tense, so we need to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, he, she, or it, use was and then the ing form the verb. But if the subject is you, we, or they, use were, W-E-R-E, and then that ing form of the verb. And you need both parts. You need the past tense form of be, and you need the ing form to make the past progressive. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The song was worming around a few artists before she decided to record it. I actually saw a sentence very close to this and decided it was a good example for us. So a particular singer was talking about recording this popular song, but the song had been suggested. It was sort of getting passed around, like maybe this artist will sing it and record it. No, maybe this one, maybe that one, until, right, she heard it and said, that's going to be my song. Okay. So again, you can see past progressive, that idea of the song kind of moving around from person to person. And then it's finally interrupted with a simple past tense verb. That's another pattern you'll see often in English. Two verbs in a sentence, one in the past progressive, that was the ongoing action, and then an action in the simple past tense that interrupted that ongoing action. Now let's move on and talk about making negative past progressive sentences. To do this, again, we start with our subject. We pay attention to what that is because we're either going to use was not or were not before we use our verb with the ing ending. Now, was not can be combined into one word, wasn't. Were not can be combined into the contraction weren't. Let's take a look at an example of that. The farmers weren't worming lambs unless they appeared to need it. Okay. Here, this goes back to our third definition, very specific, again, to working with animals, treating them to prevent parasites or to get rid of parasites. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, start with was or were. Whichever form matches your subject, that subject comes next. Then you're going to have the ing form of the verb. An example of this. Was she worming her way into leading a committee? So here, maybe we don't think this person has the right credentials, the right experience. Maybe it's not the right person for the job, but they're trying to insert themselves into this specific role. Now, let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future. Today, we're going to make sentences with will. This is really common as people make predictions, so things they think will happen in the future. They use it when they're making promises and offers. You might also encounter it as people make plans as well. Maybe sometimes when they're a little less certain about the plan. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple future with will is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we start with a subject, we use will, and then the base verb. You can see that in my example. Social media companies will worm their way further into your life if you let them. This was sort of a cautionary warning, trying to encourage people not to use them as much, right? But kind of inserting themselves. In this sentence, I know the idea is kind of dominating your time, maybe taking you away from other activities, making you less present, and some of those other things. Now let's move on and talk about a negative sentence in the simple future. Again, start with your subject, use will not, and then the base verb. Will not can be combined into the contraction won't, W-O-N apostrophe T. You can see that in my example here. The farmers won't worm the baby goats until they are at least 4 weeks old. Right? So this might be done as either a promise or a prediction as well. Again, we're talking about treating animals for parasites. Finally, let's take a look at a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with will, then you'll have your subject, then the base verb. Here's another example. Will he worm his way out of doing yard work this weekend? So again, we're going back to that getting out of a situation. I know I've heard that a lot when it relates to unpleasant tasks, things people really don't want to do. So they look for ways to get out of that responsibility or maybe reasons to avoid that particular activity. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb worm. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. So exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. Like our verb, the noun worm can have several different meanings. One meaning is to talk about a creeping invertebrate animal, right? So nothing with a spine, right? That's long, it's slender, it's has a soft body, it doesn't have any limbs. Now, if this definition doesn't make a great deal of sense to you, I encourage you to go back to the beginning, look at that picture that's in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, my first page of notes there, and hopefully that will help you understand what a worm is. But let's look at an example of this noun in a sentence. The boys dug worms out of the backyard to use as fishing bait. Right? So they're going to connect it to their fishing line, right, and use that in hopes of catching a fish. Now, a second way the noun worm gets used is to refer to internal parasites. These are things that can make people or animals very, very sick. An example of this. The doctors discovered a worm that had come from drinking contaminated water. Right? So again, here we're talking about something you really don't want to get and would like to avoid at any cost, because it can make someone very, very sick and even sometimes kill them. Now, a third way to use the noun worm is not very kind. So sometimes people will call another human being a worm. They're generally describing someone they think is weak or despicable, right? So we're thinking about creatures that are crawling around in the dirt, right? So we don't generally have a good picture associated with this. Now, I want to caution you that I don't think this is a good idea generally to call someone that. But you still might overhear someone else doing it. You might encounter it in a movie, a TV show. So an example of that might be something like, I wouldn't trust that worm with my money, right? So here, saying this is not a good person, right? I'm not going to give this person money, or I'm not going to invest in their idea because I don't think they are a quality person. Now, another related word you might encounter is the verb deworm. And again, this goes back to that third definition of our verb, where we're talking about removing parasitic worms or preventing parasitic worms, generally from being in animals. An example of how you might hear this use. Vets deworm dogs by giving them oral medicines or a shot. So vets here are short for veterinarians, doctors that focus on taking care of animals here. And it's describing in the sentence how they eliminate or get rid of those things that can cause bad health outcomes for animals. Now, one more related word for today, and that's the adjective wormy. It means containing worms. An example of this: she was horrified when she looked inside the wormy can of fish, right? Oh, this sentence makes me feel a little queasy, a little sick, because you can just imagine opening something, right, and expecting to see one thing, but instead seeing worms. Ugh. Now, with that pleasant image in your mind, I want to thank you for watching today's video, and I hope you'll tune in for another video in the future. Have a great day.